The Labour Party was founded by the trade unions, the movement of working people, the emancipation of working people. And so when the trade union movement say to us, we must stand with them in their fight, then their fight is our fight.
Now, whether it is rail workers, race workers, teachers, nurses or posties, the Labour Party must stand with working people during this cost of living crisis.
I know that being a trade unionist is a fundamental part of being a Labour MP, standing in solidarity with working people fighting back.
Trade unions and their members need to know the Labour Party is on their side, because when we stand together, we can be a real force for change.
And right now, this couldn't be more needed. The Tories will soon have a new face at the top, as it's the same old story.
The Tory government, and whichever PM we have, whether it's Sunak or Truss, they want to put forward even more plans that will hit the poorest, attack our rights at work, and transfer even more money from the poorest to the richest.
Inflation is at 12%, energy bills are soaring, and real-term wages are plummeting. Meanwhile, for CEOs and shareholders, the good times just keep getting better. Now is not the time for fence-sitting.
Now is the time for Keir Starmer and Labour to stand with workers and the tens of millions who support them.
It's time to say enough is enough. We need to stand with those people prepared to fight back.
Time to pick a side.
I'm proud to be part of the Labour for Labour campaign launch, making sure that our party at every level stays true to its roots, true to the trade union movement and true to standing in solidarity with ordinary working class people the length and breadth of Britain.
In the coming weeks, Momentum activists will be attending pickets and organising solidarity meetings up and down the country. And we'll be organising for Labour Conference to make sure our party backs striking workers and the pay rise Britain needs. Good principles and good politics. So get involved with this campaign, share the video and sign up here. Welcome everyone to this online rally to launch Momentum's new Labour for Labour campaign. My name's Hilary Shan. I'm one of the newly elected co-chairs of Momentum, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here this evening and chair and introduce some brilliant speakers from across our movement. But first of all, why this campaign and why now? Well, first, me and everyone at Momentum wants to send our heartfelt solidarity to all the rail workers on strike today from the RMT and TSSA, who will also continue their strike action on Saturday. I'm sure loads of you will have been down to the picket line today and will be there again on Saturday. Please do go down if you can and show them your support. Their campaign has been instrumental in protecting their members from cuts to their pay and working conditions. But not only that, it has given hope to millions of workers across the UK who are also struggling in this cost of living crisis, alongside other campaigns like Enough is Enough. And we're delighted to have Zara Sultana here tonight, later on, speaking about that campaign. This summer has seen a wave of strike action across the UK, from CWU members at BT to rail workers, refuse workers, bus drivers, barristers, and we're even seeing wildcat strikes from Amazon workers at facilities across the country. What we're starting to see is the fight back of the working class, led by trade union leaders who refuse to lie down and accept a decline in pay and working conditions for their members. This is a hugely exciting moment, but in order to win, we have to pull together as a Labour movement. And that is why it is vital to get the Labour leadership on side, out there arguing for pay rises in line with inflation and standing side by side with workers on the picket line. This is a golden opportunity for Keir Starmer to show Labour's commitment to the working people. Yet so far, he's refused to do so. Labour for Labour is our chance to get our party back to its founding mission and to align with the huge swathe of public support, not only for the strikes, but for public ownership as well. Millions of people rely on the Labour Party to back them in times of struggle and look out for them. We cannot allow the Labour leadership to be silent at this critical juncture. Later on, I'll be talking through how you can get involved in the campaign by doing things like lobbying Labour MPs, organising your own strike solidarity events, and also passing a crucial motion to conference through your CLP in solidarity with the trade unions. But I know you'll be dying to hear from our first speaker. Sam Tarry is the former Shadow Minister for Transport, sacked from the Shadow Cabinet for standing on a picket line with transport workers, and since then has been outspoken about why the Labour Party needs to work with our trade unions in order to win at the next general election. Thanks so much for being here, Sam, and over to you.
Just checking everyone can hear me okay on this. I hope so. I've got a few sound issues. But look, today's a really important moment. It's about actually reflecting on our past as a Labour Party and a trade union movement. Because without the trade unions, our party wouldn't even have been founded. And yet today, over 100 years later, we find that the trade unions are more important than ever, and that there are more battles taking place in workplaces up and down the country. Whether it's the CW and postal workers, whether it's the RMT and TSA and ASLEF fighting on the railways, whether potentially nurses, doctors, even barristers recently have been taking industrial action. People in this country have really had enough of just how bad the economic crisis is, the crisis that they're being asked to pay for that isn't their fault. You know, the government managed to find the money when COVID and the health pandemic hit, and yet for people now who've had 10 years of austerity and then on top of that not had pay rises often at all, let alone even anywhere near in line with inflation, it simply just means that so many people are just not able to make ends meet. I had a horrific situation in my own constituency in Ilford just a few months ago where my local food bank actually got to the point where they were running low on stock and almost ran out of food. In fact, I actually intervened with local trade unions and made sure that they had money and had additional supplies made to them. But the fact that people can't even afford to be able to donate to a food bank shows just how bad things are for so many people out there. The thing that's important about this campaign is it's about being incredibly important in stressing that our strategy to win a general election means that we cannot abandon our principles. We cannot abandon those people that are on the front line, prepared to actually fight back against this government. Because low-paid Network Rail safety engineers on £18,000 a year are making difficult decisions not to go to work, given the safety critical nature of their job. TSA members in ticket offices, also on low wages, again making difficult decisions about giving up their wages to fight back and to prove the point in terms of what they actually deserve. And we're going to see this now start to spread across not just the public and other parts of the private sector, so that there are industrial disputes breaking out in not only every corner of the UK, but also in almost every corner of the economy. And for our party to be in a situation where someone such as myself or other, at that time, frontbench MPs were told you cannot be on a picket line, sent entirely the wrong message. It said that we stand on the side of the bosses, that we stand on the side of the establishment. But our party does not. Our party must always, and always will do, stand on the side of workers and working people when they fight back through whatever methods necessary, in this case, taking strike action. And it's important we do that, because my belief is that if we abandon 7 million people who are part of the wider trade union movement, not just those obviously that are affiliated directly to the Labour Party, then we will struggle to win a general election. And as I've said before, it doesn't mean that every MP will be on every single picket line, but it's about the principle of when people decide to fight back, that we back them. Because enough really is enough in the UK at the moment. People are fed up. People are knowing that energy prices are going to go through the roof over the next few months. People are already struggling to put fuel in the car and food on the table. And it's simply not good enough to say we're going to fiddle around the edges and make a few tweaks here and there. We need a more fundamental strategy for economic transformation in this country that stops the transfer of wealth from the very majority of people, and often the poorest, to the very richest, and says actually quite clearly that we will rebalance our economy in favour of the vast majority of working people in this country. And that, for me, is the undying mission of the Labour Party, to transform our economy into one that works for everyone, one in which public sector is valued properly, in which we make difficult decisions. And in this case, a difficult decision might be that we actually took a public stake or even nationalised some of our energy companies. That would be a difficult decision for a politician to take. But let's see who has the guts to stand up and actually say that is what needs to be done. We shouldn't be relying on Gordon Brown, a former Prime Minister, to say what needs to be done. We need to be coming forward with our policies and making clear that we have a plan that supports ordinary British working class people in this country in all their shapes and forms and backgrounds and colours and religions. That we have a plan that will lift people out of poverty, that will rein in things like the energy companies. And take rail, for example. Those people complaining, saying, well, it's not right that these people have inconvenienced so many commuters and families going on holiday. The reality, the stark reality, is that those companies, which are still semi-privatised, but actually in reality mainly funded still through taxpayer subsidy, turned a profit of £500 million. All the energy companies, all the water companies, and you name it, the utility companies that are making absolutely outrageous profits at the expense of ordinary people suffering. It can't go on. We can't have a situation where BP and Shell turn multi-billion pound profits and yet people's energy prices go through the roof. Real leadership would take action on these issues and be really clear that the heart of our party is built on the relationship with the trade union movement that founded us. It's what makes us different from the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party or the Green Party. Because we are a party that lives and breathes in every workplace in this country where trade unionists are organised through that link with the trade union movement directly into our party. It means it informs policy. It means it informs strategy. And that is something to be cherished and valued and upheld, something to be proud of, not something to be pretending it doesn't exist. And so I felt that it was important to take a stand and to say enough is enough. We need to demonstrate that Labour MPs, Labour councillors, any Labour politician, mayors, are clearly prepared to stand with working people in their struggles, that we are on their side. And it's been interesting, hasn't it, seeing Mick Lynch tour the studios and radio, and how his common sense socialism is cutting through to so many people. Because people out there are not stupid. They realise that things are rigged against them. And what they want is someone prepared to stand up and to call it out and then say, this is what we're going to do about sorting it out. There shouldn't be private sector involvement in the railways that turns a profit while they're sacking safety critical workers and getting rid of ticket offices across the country. There shouldn't be more privatisation in the NHS when nurses haven't had a pay rise that's worth its salt in a very long time indeed. And across local government, where I'm sure that we will see strike action taking place from UNISON and GMB in months to come as ballots are prepared. Are we going to say we don't back the binmen because they haven't had an inflation busting pay rise or any pay rise whatsoever for that matter? We need to be clear and unequivocal. We stand with people who are prepared to fight back. We stand for redistributing wealth in this country. And we will always be proud of our links with the trade union movement because our Labour Party is one and the same as our trade union movement. And for those people who say, oh, we're unhappy about how the Labour Party is moving at the moment, the answer is not to leave. The answer is to stay and to fight alongside tens of thousands of the rest of us and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of affiliated trade unionists. Because it is our party. It is the party of Keir Hardie. It is the party of the trade union movement that was founded by ASLEF over 100 years ago. It's built into its DNA, into its very fabric. And it means that when we get into government, it isn't the spivs and the spinners of the city that are in power. It isn't the corporate oligarchs that are in power. It's ordinary people through that link with the trade unions. And so when Labour wins, all of our country and working people go into power and go into government through that link. That's why it's so important that we defend it, we expand it, and that's why it's so important this campaign, Labour for Labour, is launching today and will build force across the next few months ahead of Labour Party conference. Because we want to be really clear that our party, the party founded by the trade union movement, will never ever abandon the trade union movement, will never ever abandon ordinary working people in favour of supporting those of the 1%. We are not the party of the establishment. We are the party of the grassroots. We are the party of the trade union movement. And when we stand together and stand united with a serious plan to transform our country, I believe in my heart that we will win a general election, and we will do it, and we'll put trade unionists at the heart of governing this country where they rightfully should be. So get involved, share the campaign, build it in your local CLPs, build it in your local trades councils, build it in your local trade union branches. Let's get stuck in and make this a red line, a line in the sand that says, pick a side, choose to stand with workers or choose to stand with the bosses.
Thanks so much, Sam. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So just to say, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to get involved in the chat has now been turned on. All you need to do is just reload the page and then introduce yourselves and get talking. Okay, so next up, some of you will have been enjoying the CWU's takedown of Royal Mail on Twitter today. And next up, we are delighted to welcome Tony Cairns, who's the Assistant General Secretary of the CWU and also Momentum NCG member, to talk about upcoming strikes at the Royal Mail and BT. We send our solidarity to you, Tony, and to all your members, and we'll definitely see you on the picket line next week. Over to you.
Thanks, Hilary. And thanks for that introduction. Just wanted to say thanks to Sam Tarry as well, because I've been dismissed from the Shadow Cabinet. We invited Sam down to address our picket line at BT Tower a couple of weeks ago when we were on strike, and Sam turned up and gave a marvellous show of support as an MP and as a trade unionist to workers who hadn't been on strike for quite some time. And that's culminated now with the announcement of the results of our Royal Mail ballot, whereas next Wednesday, the 31st of August, CW will have almost 160,000 workers out on strike. That'll be in BT, Openreach, and the Royal Mail Group. It's probably the biggest union strike that we've seen so far this year, this summer. And you know, everybody's welcome to come down to those picket lines. You know where your local Royal Mail delivery offices is. There'll be picket lines there. Feel free to come down and show your support. I wanted to pick up on the point again that Sam had raised. This point about Labour MPs or the Cabinet not being on the picket line. Now, on the one hand, that's a fine position to take for the leader of the Labour Party if he insisted that Labour MPs and shadow cabinet ministers don't sit on boards of companies, don't act as advisors to companies, or don't attend dinners with business leaders for the same companies that are attacking workers' terms and conditions. It's rank hypocrisy. There are going to be one or two reasons for this. Either they fundamentally don't understand why people strike and what picket lines are for. And to me, that's a simple message. If Labour and its leadership don't understand why organised labour strikes and all that's going on today, and why in those strikes people put up picket lines, then they're not fit to be leaders of the Labour Party. And if that's the case, then people like Starmer and people like Rachel Reeves need to go, because I think there's an important message that they send to us here when they say this, is because if they don't understand these issues in a fundamental sense, then in power they're not going to govern for the people. They need to make a decision about whose side they're on. They're either on the side of those people who make the economy work, i.e. workers who go in, day out, or they're on the side of those people who are currently price gouging, which is what causes the inflation we're seeing, purely to hand money over to shareholders. And just on that, you've seen some of the stuff that Royal Mail have been putting out on their social media today. What's happened in Royal Mail is a company that's made £758 million profit last year. They gave £400 million to shareholders, and yet they won't pay our members a decent pay rise at the same time as they're handing £2 million over to executives in bonuses. So, you know, there's a simple thing going on here. I seen something on the internet today when this debate was going on, that if wages were to be at the 2008 level before the so-called financial crash, if wages were to be at the per week, but actually they're only around £450 a week. And what we've got is, and we've seen this with potential prime ministers that were one of the two that we're going to have. Liz Truss, because that's shown and shared by Royal Mail, by BT, and by Openreach. And what is a class war being waged on workers in this country? And the Labour Party needs to make a decision about whose side it's on. Is it on the side of Liz Truss and the bosses and the contempt that they're showing for workers, or is it on race to the bottom?
I think we're having a couple of connection issues with Tony there. I'm just going to see if he comes back on. Tony, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Where did I get to?
Back over to you, Tony.
Where did I get to? Okay. Can you hear me?
I think you're better now, Tony. I think you're okay to carry on.
My connection. Echoing Sam's final point, and I'll make this point. We need to take this message out. We need to say to the Labour Party, you know, there's a real fight going on here. There's a class war, and they need to decide the party stands for the principles for which it was founded, and that's to be on the side of workers, and to take that fight through Momentum, through your trade union branches, and through your CRPs until that message gets home, and we will take this party back to where it belongs, to the workers. Solidarity.
Thanks so much, Tony. And I know everyone on the call is sending solidarity to you and all your members. And as I said, we'll see you on the picket line next week. Okay, so next up we have Dawn Butler. Dawn has been a Labour MP for 17 years, has served in Gordon Brown's cabinet as well as Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet, and was on the picket line with ASLEF workers striking last weekend, and is a fantastic example of how Labour MPs can support the Labour movement. Brilliant to have you here, Dawn. Over to you.
Thanks, Hilary, and also sending my solidarity out to CWU and all the other trade unions that are taking the fight to the bosses. First of all, let me just say how a little bit embarrassed I am that we're having to have this conversation, because of course the Labour Party stands with trade unions and should always stand with trade unions. We were born from the trade union movement. And when I started to hear some of the lines that were coming out from the shadow cabinet, it was a little bit embarrassing, because I thought this is not an argument or a road that we should be traveling. Of course, the Tories are always going to try and attack our links to the trade union. And what we should be doing is standing tall and strong and steadfast in our support for the trade union movement. Because at the end of the day, trade unions are an aspirational vehicle for the working class. I was a full-time trade union official for 10 years. It's one of the proudest things that I've done. And we should never, ever shy away from that, ever. And when the Tories say trade union money into the Labour Party, it's clean money, unlike the corrupt, dirty money that's going into the Tory party. And we still haven't got those reports as to where all the Russian money has gone. When the Tories talk about how well paid train drivers are, they're okay paid because they have a good, strong trade union. That's the point. When they talk about people need to give up their mobile phones or don't watch telly or give up their subscriptions, do the Tories do that? Did Boris Johnson pay for his wallpaper? No, he didn't. So let's not have different standards for the working class from those at the very top. We deserve bread and we deserve roses too. We should never, ever shy away from that. So I am hoping that things like this, momentum, putting on this pressure, enough is enough, that, we will find our backbone and make sure that there is no doubt to the Labour Party support of the trade union movement. And let me tell you this as well. Standing on the picket line is not performative. Performative is when you do something but you don't care about it and you don't believe in it and you go back to ignoring it the next day. Standing on a picket line is solidarity. It's standing in solidarity with those people who are losing money to make their workplace better for them and everybody coming behind them. And that is what we must stand for. We are for the many, not the few. It's not just a slogan. It's something that we deeply hold in our hearts and believe in. That's why I'm a Labour MP. Anything else, I just wouldn't be a Labour MP. So it goes without saying that, my support is always going to be there, always. As I say, it was embarrassing that we have to make sure now that we're on the picket line, even more so, and that there's hundreds more people joining the picket line. And when people say that strikes are disruptive, of course they are, because they wouldn't be effective if they weren't disruptive. And that's why this fascist government, and it is a fascist government, because everything that they're doing is chipping away our rights and responsibilities, not just trade unionists, but all of us. So we have to stand together, because if we stand for nothing, we'll fall for everything. And that is something that we need to ensure that everybody within our party and outside of our party understands. Let me end on a few things. I hold a Jamaica party every Sunday at Party Conference. I hope people watching this will be attending. And I'm doing a 2-for-1 deal, a buy one, get one free, a bog off, for anyone that can prove they've been on a picket line this year. A 2-for-1 deal. Because at the end of the day, whatever we can do to support each other, we must make sure we do that, so we can have a little bit of fun in the road to the revolution. Why not? So we should. And I want to just say this. Of course, we should renationalize. And if people are scared about that word, renationalization, let's just talk about running water, running energy as not-for-profit endeavors, so that the money is invested back into fixing the pipes so the water is not leaking all over and flooding the houses in Brent that we had the other day, or that we are investing the money so that we're keeping the bills down. Let's run this as not-for-profit. It can be done. There is another way. We can have a high-wage economy. Why can't we? Who says we can't? Why can't we? It is time that we smash all of those preconceived, that the very few 1% at the top need to get everything and everybody else have to fight for the crumbs. As Tracy Chapman said, talking about a revolution, it sounds like a whisper. It's building more and more into a shout. So thank you, Momentum, for putting this on today.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And there's another really good reason to get down to a picket line soon. Can't wait. So our next speaker needs absolutely no introduction. Not only is she a socialist superstar and co-chair of the Socialist Campaign Group of MPs, she's also recently been involved in the Enough is Enough campaign launch, a fantastic initiative from Acorn, Tribune, the RMT and CWU. And we're delighted to have Zara Sultana joining us tonight to talk about that campaign. Thanks so much, Zara. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Hilary. Hi, everyone. I'm Zara Sultana. I'm the Member of Parliament for Coventry South, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you all this evening and to be speaking alongside such fantastic comrades and friends. This morning, I was asked in a TV interview whether I'd be going on a picket today. And I thought that was a really interesting question, as if being a Labour MP, being on a picket line was a controversial issue. I said, of course, I would be going to the picket for RMT and ASLEF workers because I'm a Labour MP and the clue is in the name. But as we know, that's not the leadership's view, and it's why this campaign, Labour for Labour, is really important, is timely, and has my full support. Our party was founded by the trade union movement. I feel like we talk about that quite a lot, but it really does need emphasis, and some people need reminding, because the party was founded by the trade union movement to give political representation to the working class and to trade unionism. Attempts to cut this link or to go along with right-wing anti-union rhetoric betrays that history and all of those people who came before us. And that's something that I will never do. I'm very proud to be a trade unionist, and I'm really proud of the strength of that trade union link that we have with our party. And unfortunately, there are people in our party who seem to accept the right-wing narrative that pits striking workers with other workers and the public as a whole. And it's simply not right. When workers go on strike, it's not workers versus the public. It's not the tube worker versus the office worker versus the firefighter or the cleaner. It's workers versus bosses. It really is that simple. It's people who have the same interests as you versus those who don't. It's people who want decent pay. It's people who want their rights protected and their public services funded versus those who don't, versus those who want wages cut, rights shredded, and our public services gutted. And that's why when we see unions like the RMT go on strike, and when they win, when the CWU win, when ASLEF, FBU, UCU, the RCN, Unite, and countless others, when they go on strike and they win, we are all better for it. We all win. We are all made stronger. And that's because we're part of a collective. It's like the old trade union saying itself, united we stand, divided we fall. And this lesson is going to be really important in the months and years ahead. We all know that the cost of living standard is the worst since records began. It's the biggest assault on our living standards, rocketing energy bills, soaring food prices. And the only thing that isn't going up is workers' wages. And it's called a cost of living crisis, but I don't think that really captures exactly what is going on, because this is a crisis for our class, but not for theirs. For them, we're seeing record profits, a record number of billionaires, and record wealth for the top 10%. So while people in our communities, and as an MP who is hearing about the difficult decisions people are making, we know that it's a cost of living crisis for many, but there are some in our society who are raking it in, and it has been a bonanza for them. And it isn't a crisis because there isn't enough wealth in this country. We all know that's not true. It's because they have hoarded all the wealth. And it's a choice. It's a choice made in Westminster, where greed is chosen over the need of working people. So in the months ahead, strikes and industrial action will be a key battleground in this fight. But we know that this fight is not going to be addressed or fixed by strikes alone. It can't be tackled just through that means, because it goes beyond that. It is food poverty and kids going hungry. It's shoddy housing and rip-off landlords. It's rocketing energy bills and fossil fuel giants making billions. And that's why Enough is Enough is a really important campaign to fight the cost of living crisis. It brings together the best of us in the trade union movement, in social movements, those of us in parliament, and those of us who are activists and campaigners. And yesterday, I can't believe it was just yesterday, we had our first event, and it was truly incredible. Thousands of people, and some unfortunately unable to come in because the venue was packed and we simply couldn't let more people in. And of course, Mick Lynch brought the house down. I mean, that does not surprise anyone. And it's great to build that movement and have more and more people join in. We had over 400,000 people sign up to our demands within a week. And I know that all of you and Momentum are part of it too. Fighting in the party to make sure that we back workers with Labour for Labour, and fighting outside the party with Enough is Enough. And what we are fighting for is incredibly important, and it's in the interest of the vast majority of the population. And we know that the policies we're fighting for too are hugely popular. But unfortunately, no one in the mainstream is championing them. So the work is with us. That's got to change. We have to push those forward in the mainstream. And it's up to all of us to collectively do that together. So thank you for having me, and solidarity with you all.
Thanks so much, Zara, and congratulations on the launch of Enough is Enough. It's brilliant to see those pictures of the packed rally last night, and we really look forward to working side by side with Enough is Enough to make change inside the party and outside as well. So thank you. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Jon Trickett MP, who's the Socialist Campaign Group of MPs rep on the Momentum NCG. Jon was the first MP to nominate Jeremy Corbyn for the leadership on the ballot in 2015 and served in his shadow cabinet from 2016 to 2020. A long-time campaigner in Parliament for socialism and democracy. He's also been closely involved with Momentum from the very beginning. It's an absolute pleasure to go over to you, Jon.
Thanks very much, Hilary, and congratulations to everybody attending this meeting, but also putting it together. Meetings like this are not easy to make happen. And of course, Labour must be for Labour, for the wider Labour interest. We live in turbulent times. The billionaires, they've never had it so good. But wages are under attack, poverty and destitution, and yet people are beginning to fight back. So what role should the Labour Party play? Well, tonight's launch emphasised that Labour's purpose is precisely to serve the interests of Labour. Our society has been badly damaged. Oh, you might say it's being destroyed by rampant capitalism and a corrupt Tory government. But so now is not the time for the faint-hearted. It's time to remember who we are and why we came into existence. So, I want to talk about Keir. No, not Keir Starmer. I want to talk about Keir Hardie, our first leader. And having listened to me, you might feel that there's a clear message for our current leadership too. But we can still hear Keir Hardie's voice resonating through the decades since his passing. The country obviously has changed massively since his time, but there is still much he can teach us and will teach us. Hardie faced an uphill struggle. The unions and many working class voters were then Liberal Party supporters, but that party had attached itself to ruling class interests rather than to those of the working class. So Hardie and the other socialist pioneers came to the conclusion that the Labour interest could only be properly served by an independent socialist party built by and working for working people. But let me take you back to my constituency in the years leading up to the creation of the Labour Party. You'll see there is much to learn about our present predicament. My constituency was built on the coal mining. And in 1883, the bosses did what they always do and still do to this day when their profits are threatened. They attacked the wages of the people who worked for them. And it is happening still today. The economic system under which we live hasn't really changed. Though in some ways its content has, ever since Hardie's days. But the miners hit back. They came out on strike. During the last week in July 1893, I should say, the largest ever industrial dispute which Britain had experienced was initiated, 300,000 miners stopped work, led by the union. And in Featherstone, in my patch, the workforce was especially militant. Then, as now, the workers began to organise pickets, which is a good thing to think about in the present days. They prevented the coal wagons from being moved from the pit head, so the coal owners couldn't sell the coal stocks. And the coal owners, the bosses, demanded that the strike should be broken, and then the British Army was deployed into the village. A huge crowd assembled, but the Riot Act was read, and the soldiers fired straight into the crowd rather than over their heads. Cries could be heard in the crowd saying, "We'd rather be shot than being hungered to death," as 2 men were left dead and many others gravely injured. This Featherstone massacre was the start of a big change in British politics. And that's because the then government was liberal. Asquith was a Home Secretary, and working people everywhere blamed him for the massacre which happened in my patch. Hardy and the socialist movement seized the moment. Keir Hardie came to Featherstone, and let's be clear, as leader of the party, he didn't tell socialists that they are not to be on picket lines. Think about that. Rather the reverse. And the massacre caused great harm to the Liberals. Her Home Secretary became known as Bloody Asquith in mining communities. And shortly after these shootings, an effigy of him with a skull and crossbones was carried to Trafalgar Square, where disturbances took place. And so began the long, slow decline of the Liberals as a party of the working class, which was an essential requisite for the growth of Labour as a party. But that wasn't the end of the story. It's not the end of the story. In 1905, a few years later, again, the bosses tried to cut the workers' wages in order to maintain their own profit levels. And it's happening now, as I've just said. Then, as now, workers led by their unions went out on strike. In the view of Hardie and the socialists at that time, and in my view now, and all of us, I guess, on this call, when workers are on strike, it's a duty of socialists to support them. And in Kinsley, another village in my constituency, the bosses attempted to do something quite evil to break the will of the employees. They evicted the striking miners from their own homes. Savage scenes played out, whole families being put out on the streets by police officers for the crime of defending their own class interest. But the miners' will wasn't broken, though they and their families then had to live in a tent city for months in freezing Yorkshire weather. And what did Keir Hardie do? And the early socialists, they didn't stand back. They brought food and money, and they organised solidarity actions. All of this led by the Labour movement, designed to sustain the strike. And once again, Keir Hardie came back to my constituency. Let's get the person correct. Keir Hardie came back to and he spoke to a meeting of thousands of miners and their families. One person in the crowd was a young boy. His father and all his family had been evicted and were living in tents. But that boy grew up to be a socialist and eventually to become a distinguished working class Labour MP after the First World War. So again, events in my area had a political impact because straight after these evictions, there was a general election. And for the first time, Keir Hardie and 28 others were elected as Labour, working class Labour MPs, and the first parliamentary Labour Party was formed. So here's my point, because you might wonder what's all this history about. Hardie's pursuit of the socialist cause, his pursuit of the working class interest, and his relentless travel to wherever workers were in conflict did no harm whatsoever to our party's electoral prospects. That is the key point, I think. Look, we stand on the shoulders of giants. They show us lessons from the early Labour movement, which we ought to be applying today. And let me say briefly some of the lessons which I believe arise. First, socialists should not distance themselves from people fighting for social justice, should not distance themselves, nor should we compromise our principles. And the Labour Party is not meant to be a career structure for budding politicians emerging from university to climb up the ladder. It's a movement aimed at emancipating working people. And let me just say this, there are only 8 socialist MPs from working class backgrounds left in Parliament. I'm one of them. It's not good enough. Keir Hardie will be astonished. The approach which I've outlined need not and would not damage us electorally, quite the reverse. Now, some on the right of our party are saying that we need to be timid in our approach to the present political situation. But there are others on the left who have become discouraged and they've walked away, haven't they? But I say we do neither. I say we stand tall, firm and proud of our beliefs that the Labour Party is there to promote the Labour interest. It always was. It always was there. Labour's pioneers showed boldness, political clarity and a willingness to fight the good fight. Those socialists, that generation, built a mighty Labour movement which began to change our country. They lit a flame which illuminated all parts of an unjust economy and society. And we must keep that flame alive, just as previous generations of socialists did by passing that torch on to us. It's the flame of democratic socialism, of liberty and equality. That's what that flame consists of. And it will continue to burn and to illuminate our world, providing that each one of you and each one of us commits ourselves to this task in the struggles to come. So my final point is this: the struggle goes on. It never ends, but we will be there, socialists, fighting for justice, for a better world and for a working class emancipation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Jon. Brilliant to have you here with us tonight. So next up, we've got Andrea Egan, who's the newly elected president of UNISON. Andrea has been a local government worker and active trade unionist in Bolton for the last 30 years and is part of the Time for Real Change, a group of UNISON activists who are determined to make the union a more democratic and active campaigning force. Welcome, Andrea, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite. My union is a public sector union, and it covers health, local government, police and justice, higher and further education, water, energy, transport, the environment, and community and voluntary sector. And we have experienced years of cuts to our public services and high volumes of outsourcing from public ownership to private profiteers. In our local UNISON branch disputes, we've seen loads of successes when our members do take that difficult decision to take on the bosses, and it boosts the confidence of other workers. Trade unions have been fighting for over a decade against service cuts and pay decline, many getting battle weary over the years, many facing the battle against outsourcing of the services to companies who want to create two-tier workforces or maximise profits. And there's been a real race to the bottom in terms of pay and terms and conditions. You know, the country clapped for the key workers who put their lives on the line to keep the country going during the pandemic. But now the government are giving public sector workers a below inflation slap in the face. In public services, we're facing a real-term 27% impact on our salaries spending power from where we were 10 years ago. So it's no wonder that the working class are feeling poorer, because we are poorer. UK inflation has risen above 10% for the first time in 40 years, driven by soaring prices for food and fuel as households come under mounting pressure from the cost of living crisis. Our bills are soaring, energy, childcare, food, fuel, and pay is plummeting. The Tories promised high wage economy, but in reality it's anything but. And so this government, distracted by its own internal warfare, are standing by while the country gets a pay cut on top of the 12 years of austerity. So it is no surprise that industrial disputes are spreading across our economy, from rail workers, bus drivers to barristers, you know, with the unions attempting now to negotiate pay rises close to inflation, with a fresh round of rail strikes starting today. BT, Royal Mail and the post office workers will walk out from next week, and then the healthcare workers, school workers, local government workers are set to be balloted on their paying conditions. You know, government ministers are deluded if they think workers can put up with any more misery. And above inflation, pay rises are absolutely essential to rescue families on the brink. Yet it contrasts since the pandemic, because the FTSE top 350 companies have seen their profits soar by 43%. Britain has a profiteering crisis. This government's long demonstrated that it doesn't care about working people. They only care about protecting their stocks and shares and their own wealth. So it doesn't matter who wins the Tory leadership contest, because neither Sunak or Truss has a plan to make life better for working people and their families. Now, since Thatcher, the Tory government have done all they can to smash workers' rights and restrict workers who try to protect themselves through the trade union membership. But trade unions now can't take industrial action unless 50% of the affected workers vote to take action, with 40% having to vote to take that action. And now they're passing legislation to allow bosses to bring in agency staff to cover the work of those on strike. And I'm really pleased that the trade unions are challenging the government in the courts on a claim that the government is in breach of Article 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which protects the right to strike and international labour standards. But when Labour were in power, they did nothing to repeal the UK's anti-trade union legislation. And so the Labour leader now should be talking with confidence and conviction about what he will do, not just about appealing the anti-trade union legislation, but how he'll strengthen the trade union rights. You know, Truss has been bold in her leadership page. She wants to make further attacks on the trade unions. So the Labour Party leadership has to be equally bold about repealing anti-union laws and strengthening our rights at work. Labour has to call this government out, and the talk of making further legislation to limit the union powers is an attack on working class people, and the Labour Party have to be bold, and they have to be loud, and they have to be confident in their opposition. But we are seeing working people across the country, you know, they are standing together to say they've had enough. And when they're left with no choice but to take industrial action to defend the jobs and pay and safety through the union membership, they often will. The trade union movement has seen over decades a steady decline in people joining a union. However, as the trade union movement are now showing its relevance, working people are now joining the union. With working class people in struggle, we're beginning to unite them through collective action. But where is the Labour Party right now? A party born of the trade union movement. And it was with absolute utter despair that I learnt that the leader of the Labour Party had instructed the front benchers to stay away from the picket lines. The Labour leader is completely out of touch with the mood of the country. And UNISON isn't happy with the current Labour leadership stance. We've issued a public statement already, which is unusually strong from our union. We know that a Labour leadership that won't back our members has lost its way. I'm UNISON's president, but I'm also a member of its National Labour Link, which governs our union's relationship with the Labour Party. And I will be doing my bit to ensure there's an honest conversation within our union about the current Labour leadership and how it's letting working people down. But I don't feel it's right. It's not the right time to break the link. You've got to be in the party to influence it. So I would urge other unions to use their influence with the leadership. You know, striking workers need to know the Labour Party is with them, shoulder to shoulder. It is outrageous and unprecedented that the leadership is saying they won't be. They must back our members and they must be bold. They must support inflation-proof pay deal for workers, and they must start talking about renationalising rail, mail, energy and water to stop our members from being ripped off and transferring their hard-earned wages to the shareholders. The pain is real for our people. But what of our youth? We have seen a shift in the activism of the youth movement. You know, we've got a planet in crisis, a global climate emergency, capitalism pushed people into poverty, and with all those basic rights of a decent home, secure job, and living and health standards eroded, and for so many they've been removed. We need a party that will also lead the young and the youth. You know, Corbyn give people hope. His policies inspired thousands of young people to join our movement. But now the party has suffered a significant decline in membership. Trade unions are bouncing back because we're capturing the mood. And the Labour Party must do the same. How can it be that the Labour Party can lose nearly 100,000 members between 2020 and 21? What kind of leadership allows 20% of the membership to leave and doesn't see it as a problem? This is absolutely unprecedented and totally self-inflicted wound down to the Labour leadership, and their attacks on socialists within the party and on inspiring leadership and policies are just not good enough for this crisis at this time. Many of us in UNISON have had enough of the Labour Party spending more resources and energies on expelling good socialists and comrades and not enough time on what needs to be done. We must demand developing inspiring policies, mobilising Labour members to campaign for a Labour government. It's time to end this madness. And the exciting launch of Enough is Enough, a trade union initiative which UNISON will look into to see if, you know, we can support it. It shows that unions are relevant and still lead workers in our class. But how on earth is the Labour Party allowing itself to miss this opportunity to inspire working class people, especially young people? So I'm going to end it on this. The Labour Party conference in September is a chance for us to find our voices. And in the face of the worst cost of living crisis in decades, the leader of our party must be made to deliver. An election may be around the corner, and we won't win with soundbites or timid policies. When there's an election, we have to show strength and leadership, and we have to show that leadership now. Or the saying, they're all the same, will follow us into the next future election, and it'll destroy any chances of returning a Labour government. It isn't too late. We can turn it around. We need a summer of solidarity, and we need to make progress at conference, comrades. Comrades, thank you for your time, and I'll see you at the Labour Party conference. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and we look forward to seeing you there. So we want to talk a little bit more about the campaign now. We've had some fantastic speakers and we've got more to come, but we've got hundreds of people on this call, which is absolutely fantastic, who are all wanting to act. So what do we actually want you to do? You can find full details of the Momentum Labour for Labour campaign at the link that's on your screens and also in the chat as well. But here are 4 things that we want you to do. First of all, join your local Labour for Labour WhatsApp group. You'll find the links to these in the chat. There's one for every region. And this is for Momentum members and supporters to organise, specifically to organise together to get on picket lines. We've already got loads of members in there. We've got over 500 activists already in there organising to get down to picket lines together, starting on Saturday with the rail strikes again. So please do click on that link and get in those WhatsApp groups, get yourself down to the picket line and make sure you take photos of yourself there, get them on social media with hashtag Labour for Labour, and also post them in those WhatsApp groups so that we can put them out on social media as well to really pressure Keir Starmer and show the strength of our movement. Second up, we want you to organise your own strike solidarity events. Momentum groups across the country are already organising these. We've already had some held in Worthing, in Southwark as well, and we want loads more of these for Momentum members and supporters to network with your local striking workers and build those bridges, build those relationships. We've put together a resource pack on how to do this, which again you can find in the link. And don't worry if you haven't been engaged with your local Momentum group before, we can guide you. Just get in touch with us. We'll help you sort it out. We'll help you organise those events. But these are fantastic opportunities to really bring us together with the trade union movement. Thirdly, really importantly, we've put together a model motion and we need it passed through as many CLPs as possible. This can be a conference motion. If your CLP hasn't yet passed a conference motion, then please do take the model motion to your CLPs before the September deadline and get that passed. If you have already passed a conference motion in your CLP, you can still take it to your CLP and pass it as a normal motion. This is absolutely vital if we're to win this battle at conference this year. And again, you can find a link to the model motion in the chat. And then lastly, you can use our lobbying tool, which again will be linked in the chat. This is to lobby Labour MPs. If you have a local Labour MP, ask to set up a meeting with them, ask them to support the striking workers and to attend a picket line with you and other Momentum members once you've organised that in the chat. If every single person on this call does those 4 things, there will be an avalanche of grassroots pressure on Keir Starmer to overturn the picket line ban and to back striking workers. So we're going to continue now with our next speaker. Next up, we have got Martin Abrams, who is the London rep on our Momentum National Coordinating Group. Martin is, he works for the RMT and is also a GMB rep, and we're delighted to have Martin with us. Have we got Martin with us? Okay, it looks like we might be having a little bit of an issue with Martin's connection, so we're going to go on to the next speaker. So next up, we have got Mish Rahman, who is Vice Chair of Momentum's NCG and also grassroots voice candidate for the upcoming NEC elections. Mish has been on the NEC for the last 2 years, standing up for socialist policy and democracy within the party, and has relentlessly pushed for the publication of the Ford report as well, which of course we saw just a few weeks ago. Brilliant to have you here, Mish. Over to you.
Thank you, Hilary, and thanks for chairing this great event. It's a sad indictment of the current Labour Party that we have to even launch a campaign called Labour for Labour, but it's surprising that when we have establishment first Labour leadership, which is failing to represent working people, not just working people, working class people, those are not just in work as well, whether that is people in work or unable to work. But time and time again, this leadership fails to muster any meaningful opposition or alternative to a hard right Tory government when energy bills are up, when water bills are up, council tax is up, national insurance is up, even broadband charges are up, and people are having to choose between heating and eating. And ours isn't a radical proposal, but it's a common sense one. Now should have been the time for Labour to show how much difference it would have made to people's lives, and they could have done that by demanding public ownership of our scandal-ridden water system. Water bills are rising every day, and with a commitment to public transport. Imagine a bold socialist programme which was based on public ownership, that isn't just widely and democratically backed by the whole Labour movement, but popular with the public too, and the so-called Red Wall. And ordinary people cannot afford to wait without a rise in their wage packet. Our railway workers in the TSSA, RMT and ASLEF are rightly taking strike action, and our posties and communication workers too at the CWU, as well as UCU university staff and the lawyers and the gig economy workers. It's only a matter of time, Pete, before our NHS staff and our teachers start striking. But the Labour leadership, instead of taking the side of the unions and tackling these issues, is tinkering, handing out the equivalent of discount vouchers, giving people £60 a year off VAT or £46 a year off prepayment meters. Even the £1,000 saving on energy bills isn't acceptable when I can't even afford the last energy rise, which has doubled my bills. Now, if you're going to give the energy companies any money, nationalise them. Our demand is simple, Keir Starmer, stop messing about, help people and not shareholders. And Labour for Labour, our campaign, demands that you and your Labour MPs back strike action. You and your Labour MPs show picket line solidarity, and you and your Labour MPs support the abolition of all the anti-union laws. And Labour for Labour demands that you and your Labour MPs call for above inflation pay rises for workers. Call it your answer to levelling up, call it common sense, or even call it socialism, call it whatever you like, because we're telling you now, people are beyond the end of their tether, and we will see you in Liverpool, and the unions and members of all sides of the conference floor will show you that pro-union and pro-working class principles is what Labour means and what Labour is. And this should be your flagship conference in preparation for a general election to show the country that Labour is ready. Don't know why you need so much drama to achieve a common sense policy. And elections for the NEC are ongoing, Vote for me and my other socialist grassroots comrades, because this NEC will sit at a manifesto meeting that ends up cutting and trimming Labour's offers to the people. And it's important that you have socialists, fighting socialists, who represent working class people and their policies at the table, and socialists that know the meaning of solidarity, and socialists that stand firmly with working class people, whether it's on the pickets, whether it's in work, whether it's out of work, whether it's in our communities, and when socialists that will speak on your behalf. So vote for us in the NEC elections, and solidarity.
Thanks so much, Mish. Yeah, and everybody, make sure that you do vote in those elections. You should have your ballots in your inboxes. Take a look and make sure you've got them. These are vital NEC elections, and the ballot closes next Friday, the 26th. So make sure you get your votes in. So we can now go over to Martin Abrams, who sorted his connection out. So Martin is a London rep on the Momentum NCG. He's an RMT staffer and GMB rep as well. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Hilary, and good evening, comrades. My name's Martin Abrams. I sit on Momentum's NCG, but my day job is working for RMT, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and talk at the launch of Momentum's vital Labour for Labour campaign. Over recent weeks and months, my heart has absolutely swelled with pride when I see my union RMT fighting for a square deal for working people. I don't think it's wrong to say that the rail strikes have sparked a movement, and we are riding a crest of a wave of amazing solidarity from across the Labour movement, and we're building support across the country. You know, there is a groundswell of support from across the public, and that is absolutely fantastic to see. What isn't great to see, however, is the Labour Party instructing their MPs to stay away from picket lines, because solidarity is a very, very powerful thing. And the simple act of the Labour leader and the Labour front bench coming out and supporting strike action when we're facing, you know, the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. You know, it might not achieve anything. It might not shift the debate. It might not shift the negotiations. But to show that display of solidarity is absolutely vital at this point in time when people are fighting literally for their own survival. And I think the current position from Keir Starmer is nothing short of farcical, and shows an absence of leadership and opposition to this despicable Tory government. And, you know, this is moving from a cost of living crisis to a humanitarian crisis. And it's absolutely vital that the Labour Party stands shoulder to shoulder with working people. You know, the Labour Party is in opposition. You know, make no mistake, we are in opposition. We are not, the Labour Party is not in government. And we should be opposing this Tory government. The Tory government are pulling the strings of a lot of these companies and standing in the way of any progress being made in these pay negotiations. And the best thing to get through a cost of living crisis is for people to get more pay in their pockets. And, you know, members, you know, from RMT or members from UCU or you know, the other unions that are going out on strike at the moment, they are not asking for much. They are asking for a square deal. And at the moment, the employers are refusing really to even put anything on the table, particularly in the rail strikes, because the government is basically standing in their way. And, you know, the Labour government, you know, should really be standing, like I said, shoulder to shoulder. You know, it's important that Labour picks a side, because strike action is spreading as the cost of living crisis worsens. And, you know, it's almost as if that Keir Starmer has painted himself into a corner of the fence that he's been sitting on. And he will continue to be challenged on this in the media. You know, the more strikes that take place, if the Labour Party hold this position of banning their MPs or the Labour front bench from attending picket lines, he's going to be challenged on this more and more, and the position is going to become untenable. So, you know, and I think it's important to outline what this particular rail strike is about as well. So I'll just give you a very, very quick little bit of background. Rail workers voted by almost 9-1 in favour of strike action on an impressive 71% turnout. And, RMT members have not jumped the gun. The action is a last resort, as previously been mentioned. Strike action is always a last resort. And after 2 years of discussions where the industry and UK ministers have failed to address any concerns on jobs, pay and conditions, and now the government are coming for those jobs, pay and conditions. They're waging wholesale attacks, and RMT members' jobs are under threat. The government are trying to push forward for 2,500 compulsory redundancies on the maintenance side of Network Rail. And, that threat has not gone away. And that will mean an increased risk of safety critical infrastructure, less staff on stations and trains, and include the removal of guards and catering staff as well. I think it's important to note that, these staff are not massively well paid. They've got a good union in the RMT, but a lot of these staff that are going out on strike are, like they say, they're the ticket office staff, they're the catering staff, and they're really going to struggle to make ends meet through this cost of living crisis. And that's why it's important, first and foremost, protect their jobs, but make sure that they also get a square deal from the government. So the Labour Party need to pick a side. At the moment, there is a vacuum of leadership, and we can see that groups are stepping into that vacuum, whether it's trade unions, creating that wave of solidarity across the movement at the moment, or the Enough is Enough campaign. But this campaign for Momentum is absolutely vital. The Labour for Labour campaign is absolutely vital to make sure we keep highlighting this debate, because it's not just about the disputes that are happening at the moment. The government, whoever is going to lead that government, it looks like oh God, I've completely forgotten her name. Their names escape me. But whoever's leading it is going to be a despicable Tory leader, and they're already Liz Truss. There we go. I think I've kind of blanked her out of my brain. She's so horrendous. But whoever's leading this government is going to wage a war on trade unions and trade union rights. And yesterday, Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Transport, he outlined a 16-point plan, which they are essentially trying to criminalise dissent, with a 16-point plan to come and attack trade unions, some of the most fundamental rights, things that will essentially ban picket lines from taking place outside train stations. They describe it as critical infrastructure, increasing the ballot threshold for strikes, making it really, really difficult for any trade union or trade union member to exercise their democratic rights. So this campaign isn't just about, the Labour Party, the optics of Labour MPs being on picket lines. We need to get the Labour Party to stand up and fight against the wholesale attacks on democratic trade union rights. So, it's really important that all Labour Party members support the motions that are going to come to your CLPs over the next few weeks before Labour Party conference, and that all delegates that are going to Labour Party conference support this motion, the Labour for Labour motion, to make sure that we shift the Labour Party where it needs to be, standing shoulder to shoulder with workers and making sure that they stand behind workers as we're facing one of the worst cost of living crises in living memory. Thank you, comrades. Solidarity.
Thanks, Martin. Solidarity to you and everyone at RMT as well. And look forward to seeing everyone on the picket line this weekend. So next up, we've got Jess Barnard, who, as many of you will know, is a youth worker and also outgoing chair of Young Labour, and has been an absolute shining light amongst our young activists for the last couple of years. Delighted to have Jess here as a Grassroots Voice NEC candidate, along with Mish as well. She'll be an absolutely fantastic socialist voice on the NEC, so please make sure you get those votes in and vote for her. Brilliant to have you here tonight, Jess. Over to you. Oh, Jess, we're having trouble with your sound. I don't know if you've got your mic switched off. Should be something on the bottom of your screen, the little... If you click on the bottom of your screen, you should see your mic, whether you're on mute at the moment. Yeah, yeah, brilliant. We can hear you now.
Thank you. Thanks, Hilary, for the introduction, and thanks for organising this. I know we've heard a lot tonight about the incredible history of the Labour Party and the pride that we have and our connection with the trade union movement. And that's why it's so good to see this campaign launched, but so frustrating that it's necessary at this time. And I think it's just important to very quickly address, we hear a lot of people saying that they're leaving Labour or telling people to leave Labour. And I do understand the frustration that we feel at this leadership and their refusal to stand on the side of working class people. But as working class people, we don't have a choice but to fight. We need to fight for our rights. We need to fight for our jobs, for our pay, for our terms and our conditions. But we also need to fight for our party. There should be our voice in Westminster. This is the fight of our lives, and we don't have the privilege of pretending that we aren't in that fight. So please stay fighting and get organising. And this is why it's so good and so important that we have these calls to do this work. As a working class person from a working class community, I grew up in a deprived and neglected part of the country. I've been a youth worker for families struggling under the pressures of Tory cuts, of decades of neglect, of carving up communities and services. But I'm under no illusions about the arguments that we have to win and the solidarities that we have to build across communities. There is still a long way to go. And that was created by decades of Thatcherite division among the working classes, trying to deliberately tear us apart and tear us against each other and make sure that we don't stand in support of each other, because that's when we're strongest and that's what they're afraid of. But those problems and those divisions, they are not going to be overturned by pretending that this isn't happening. Those divisions are repaired by showing solidarity, by ensuring that we lead the way proudly, ensuring that we demand that every single working class person lives with dignity and can stand up for their rights. And that's the job of the Labour Party. In Young Labour, we were really proud to announce that we were refused to campaign for MPs or candidates or councillors who break the picket and refuse to support workers who are forced to take industrial action in disputes. And that's a frustrating situation we find ourselves in, where we are having to remind MPs that you are in Westminster to serve working class people, not to announce that you would give our taxes to greedy shareholders who are pushing millions of people into real extreme poverty. So if you are young and in precarious work, I know it is so hard to organise in your workplace, but together we can do it. So please join a union, talk to your friends, reach out to your union, ask for training opportunities, talk to your colleagues, and let's make sure that our generation never again is put in this situation. I am proud to be standing for Labour's NEC. As Mish mentioned earlier, we desperately need more working class people at every single level in the Labour Party. And I hope everybody in this call gets organised in some form or another, whether that's organising in campaigns, whether that's through your union, whether that's solidarity with picket lines, or whether that's in the Labour Party. One of the reasons that the party bureaucracy try to prevent us having a voice and try to prevent this happening is because they know that we are true to our roots. We're not afraid to deliver some honesty to the leadership, and we don't see this party as a route for a comfy, well-paid career. We're in this because we care, because we have to, because we know where we come from and what we need to win. The purpose for us is to deliver a transformational Labour government that will never again turn their back on working class people and will clamp down on these industries that are destroying our country for greed. And we won't just tax, but we will renationalise and ensure that we end the stark inequality that we see today. So I really hope we can count on your support as the grassroots voice candidates. Please get your ballots in tonight. Don't put it off any longer. Let's send a really clear message to Starmer to get on board with working people or get out of the way.
Thanks, Jess. So our penultimate speaker is Caitlin Lee. Caitlin is a young trade unionist and standing to be Scottish rep on the Young Labour Committee as part of the Socialist Future slate. She's branch chair of Unite Hospitality in Glasgow, and it's brilliant to have a young trade unionist here. Truly the future of our movement. Welcome, Caitlin, over to you.
Hi, thank you. So I think one of the most important parts to actually talk about and why we need Labour MPs to actually be putting robust Labour legislation forward is I'm a young person and my employment years have solely been Tory governments, right? So I'm in a position where I have only worked in 0-hour contracts. My minimum wage has been pathetic. I started work at 16. It was at £4.50. Now it's £9.50 when you actually look at the cost of toilet paper, which is £11.50 here. So I can work an hour's wages and I still actually can't afford a basic thing like toilet paper. Like, that's the situation that we're in. We need, in like hospitality, tips legislation. So we know that hospitality workers are the lowest paid. We know that tips are used. We know that employers abuse that. Why is this legislation not being put forward? There is a bill just now, but it needs to be more robust, and it needs to be consulting in the union, like Unite Hospitality, about what we actually need. The amount of casualisation that we are facing in employment right now. So look at hospitality. So like 0-hour contracts, agency workers, but that's now spreading out. It's not just hospitality workers that are on casual contracts. It's not just hospitality that's, again, people's jobs are being replaced with agency workers, and that needs to change, and we need to actually have robust legislation to be able to do that. One of the most important things is spreading out trade, like making trade union access within workplaces so important. So we've moved into a more of a service sector and this economy. I'm mixing up my words. So we've moved into more of a service economy. The trade union laws do not service those jobs. So, for instance, like I'm saying, hospitality, you need 50% plus one. That is incredibly difficult to get. And what you end up getting is a toxic circle where people cannot organise because they're then faced with losing their job. And that's what's happening. We need to be able to access all workplaces, and that can only be done through legislation. And then once we've done that, we can build up, right? So we've got industries fighting for the improvement in conditions. There are other industries like your Deliveroo drivers, your Amazon workers, that are fighting for the basics because we don't have this access. So Labour really needs to actually look at how trade unions can service the industries that are now so prevalent. From my personal experience, like, one of the things that actually happened to me was I was going to be made redundant during the pandemic. So it was like June 2020, my company decided they couldn't afford to pay the national insurance contributions for me to continue to actually have a livelihood when I didn't have a choice, that I had to stay at home because hospitality was obviously closed. I had worked in that hotel for 5 years, and my redundancy package, because of my age and my casualisation, meant that for 5 years' work, I wasn't going to be able to pay a month's rent with the package that I got. It was £500. That's from 5 years of work. That was the situation. I was going to be put into destitution, and that shows that legislation isn't there to support us. So it's one of the reasons that I have stood for chair of Scottish Young Labour and have been elected. Woohoo. And that's why it is really important to link up what industrial demands we actually have and how the political sphere can actually improve working conditions also. I think when you're thinking about like organising in your workplace and why it's so important for young people to organise, because we are in these industries that have such low density. There's a reason that they're the most precarious and the most low paid. It's we don't have the organising power, and that only comes from workers organising. That only comes from seeing wins, like the amount of wins that Unite Hospitality's had recently. That shows workers that standing up is actually worth it, and that should be celebrated. We should be celebrating the fact, we shouldn't be celebrating the fact that workers have to go on strike. That should never be the situation, but we should be celebrating the amount of solidarity that we're seeing, and the fact that the working class have said no more to the conditions that we're facing, no more to people pushing profit over safety, over job security, and over the basics of actually having a wage where you can guarantee that you can feed yourself, heat your home, and keep a roof over your head. But that's not the reality that we're in right now. And we need to connect the industrial and the political to make sure that the economy and our workplaces and our governments are servicing the working people. One of the other things is basically talking about the fact that young people are organising, and it is the precarious industries that are organising as well. We've got brewery workers, we've got Amazon, we've got warehouse workers, we've got hospitality. All these young people are organising, and that's also the future of our party. That's so important to actually realise that we need to be looking after these young people so that they can then come through in our party and be able to represent workers in both in their workplace and actually as vibrant members of the party. And I think that's definitely a kind of energy that I'm going to bring to Scottish Young Labour, because I have came through the industrial side, and I do want to ensure that the political side of the Labour Party is connected, because if we don't fight together, none of us will win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Thank you. But last speaker, last but not least, is Ruth Day, who is standing to be the Southwest rep on Labour Students Committee. They have pledged to organise student workers, build union membership, as well as show solidarity with UCU members in their fight for better pay and conditions. Brilliant to have you here, Ruth. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Hilary, and also to all the excellent speakers we've had today. So we've heard about what we need to do within the party to fight for Labour to do right by its name and stand with working people. And a key struggle within this, which can lead the fight, is young Labour and Labour students, which is the future and heart of our movement. So over the last couple of weeks, not only have Labour members been elected at NEC reps, but young and student members will have received their ballots to vote in young Labour and Labour students' elections. We have an incredible team of candidates on the Socialist Future slate for both Labour students and young Labour. People who have campaigned tirelessly for the party in their communities, schools and universities have been part of organising the biggest wave of rent strikes that the student movement has ever seen. Now, these elections are a must-win for us. It is vital that we keep young Labour socialists and inspire a new generation of socialist activists. It's also vital that we win and build a new, radical and democratic national Labour students, as student members of Labour can elect a national committee for the first time. After years of gerrymandering by successive Labour students' committees, campaigning by student members in response to this, and a recent huge win for our current young Labour student reps, the old Labour students was dissolved in 2019 to make way for a new national Labour students built on the principle of one member, one vote, which is what our student members are electing today. We are incredibly proud to be standing with the support of trade unions. So we've got support from the FBU, TSSA and CWU, with Unite endorsing many of our candidates, and GMB Young Workers, our candidate Nabila, who's running for Young Labour Chair. Our party is the party of working people, of the Labour movement, and we need youth and student leaders who understand the importance of solidarity and will stand with workers on strike. As the government continues to make the cost of living crisis worse and ignores the impact it will have and is already having on young people and students, it is vital that Labour's youth and student wings work hand in hand to organise with unions in our workplaces, on our campuses and in our communities to build a socialist future. And if elected, both our Young Labour and Labour Students Committees will work with unions to deliver political education about workplace organising to young and student members, which encourage them to join and also become active in their trade unions. We will be on the picket line in solidarity with unions defending working conditions, and we will support their resistance to new Tory attempts to repress the trade union movement. And in particular, in Labour students, we will leverage our power to support UCU and other education union strikes and campaigns against the erosion of pay, pensions and conditions. In our roles, we will also support the aims of campaigns such as Labour for Labour and build a Young Labour and Labour students which stands with our unions, mobilises to get members on picket lines and fights for our party and the leadership to do the same. So ballots are now open for both elections and it will close on the 26th of August. So please check your emails and make sure you vote for your future candidates, and you can follow us on Twitter at socialist_YL. Because a socialist future will not be handed to us. We must come together. We must turn despair and disenfranchisement into hope and power, and we must organise together. Thank you so much for having me, and solidarity, everyone.
Thanks so much, Ruth. So it just falls to me to wrap up tonight and to thank all of our amazing speakers that we've had, and to thank all of you for being here on this call. It's amazing to see so many people energised by this campaign, and we've heard tonight exactly why Labour needs to stand for Labour. So a quick recap on what we need you to do tonight. You can find the full details of our mobilisation campaign in the chat and the link on the screen. But the 4 things we need you to do is to join your local regional Labour for Labour WhatsApp group, get in touch with us about organising your own Strike Solidarity event, pass our model motion through your CLP, either as a conference motion or normal motion, and use our lobbying tool to lobby Labour MPs to back the workers and attend the picket lines. And if you are not already a Momentum member, now is the time to join. Stand with us, stand with the workers, and we'll see you on the picket line. Thanks and good night, everyone.
The Labour Party was founded by the trade unions, the movement of working people, the emancipation of working people. And so when the trade union movement say to us, we must stand with them in their fight, then their fight is our fight.
Now, whether it is rail workers, race workers, teachers, nurses or posties, the Labour Party must stand with working people during this cost of living crisis.
I know that being a trade unionist is a fundamental part of being a Labour MP, standing in solidarity with working people fighting back.
Trade unions and their members need to know the Labour Party is on their side, because when we stand together, we can be a real force for change.
And right now, this couldn't be more needed. The Tories will soon have a new face at the top, but it's the same old story.
The Tory government, and whichever PM we have, whether it's Sunak or Truss, they want to put forward even more plans that will hit the poorest, attack our rights at work, and transfer even more money from the poorest to the richest.
Inflation is at 12%, energy bills are soaring, and real-term wages are plummeting. Meanwhile, for CEOs and shareholders, the good times just keep getting better. Now is not the time for fence-sitting.
Now is the time for Keir Starmer and Labour to stand with workers and the tens of millions who support them.
It's time to say enough is enough. We need to stand with those people prepared to fight back.
Time to pick a side.
I'm proud to be part of the Labour for Labour campaign launch, making sure that our party at every level stays true to its roots, true to the trade union movement, and true to standing in solidarity with ordinary working class people the length and breadth of Britain.
In the coming weeks, Momentum activists will be attending pickets and organising solidarity meetings up and down the country. And we'll be organising for Labour Conference to make sure our party backs striking workers and the pay rise Britain needs. Good principles and good politics. So get involved with this campaign, share the video and sign up here.